The afternoon sun streamed into my kitchen, painting warm stripes across the checkered floor. Mom, are you sure you're all right? You went quite pale there for a minute. Rebecca rushed over, her hand fluttering around my shoulder. I waved her away, a little embarrassed by the sudden dizziness. It was just a little spell, dear. I'm fine. Truly. I took a sip of the lukewarm tea she'd brought me, the floral scent strangely comforting after the momentary disorientation. Just getting older, I suppose, I chuckled, trying to brush it off, but Rebecca's worried frown lingered. Julian, her fiancé, entered the kitchen then, his brow furrowed with concern. Maybe we should call Dr. Evans, Louise, just to be safe. He placed a reassuring hand on Rebecca's arm, and they exchanged a look that pricked at me with a strange unease. Honestly, you two fuss over me too much. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I pushed myself up from the kitchen chair, a little stiffer than usual, admittedly. I'm going to go water the roses. Rebecca and Julian followed me out to the garden, their solicitousness hovering around me like a swarm of bees. Be careful, Mom. The ground's a little uneven by the rose bushes, Rebecca warned, her voice laced with a strange tension I couldn't quite place. Yes, Louise, Julian added, his tone overly careful. Wouldn't want another fall, especially after last week. He glanced at Rebecca, and again that unsettling shared look passed between them. I knelt by the rose bushes, the fragrant blooms a burst of color against the green foliage. As I watered them, I felt their gazes on me, weighing me down like an unwelcome blanket. You know, Mom, Rebecca began, her voice soft yet firm. Julian and I were talking, and we're really worried about you living here alone. My hand tightened around the watering can. What are you talking about? Rebecca, I've managed perfectly well on my own for years. I stood up, my back protesting with a sharp twinge. Since Dad passed, remember, I met her gaze, trying to gauge the meaning behind her careful words. Of course, Mom, we know. But things are different now. After the fall, she trailed off, her eyes flicking towards Julian, who stepped forward, taking over the conversation. Louise, he began, his tone smooth and practiced. We think it might be time to consider some assisted living. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Assisted living, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. You think I need to go to a nursing home? The image of sterile hallways and shared rooms flashed through my mind, a chilling contrast to the vibrant gardens surrounding me. It's not a nursing home, Mom, Rebecca corrected quickly, though her words lacked conviction. It's a beautiful community, Sunshine Manor. They have activities, social events, people your own age, Julian chimed in, painting a picture of leisurely days filled with bridge games and afternoon tea. Think of it as a vacation, Louise, a chance to relax and let someone else take care of things for a while. Their words felt slick and insincere, like a salesman peddling a faulty product. I looked from Rebecca to Julian, my heart sinking with a growing sense of dread. A vacation, I repeated, the irony stinging my tongue. You think I need a vacation from my own home, my own life? Rebecca reached out to touch my arm, but I instinctively pulled away. Mom, we just want what's best for you, she pleaded, her eyes wide with what I now recognized was not concern, but a carefully crafted mask of it. We're worried about your safety, your well-being. Julian nodded in agreement, his expression earnest. It's the responsible thing to do, Louise. For everyone. Responsible for whom? I asked, my voice shaking with suppressed anger. For me, or for yourselves? Their faces faltered, the mask slipping for just a moment, revealing a glimpse of something calculating beneath. They recovered quickly, but the flicker of guilt in their eyes had confirmed my suspicions. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about something else entirely, something I couldn't quite grasp, yet felt with a chilling certainty. They wanted something from me, something they thought I was too old, too frail to protect, and they were using my recent fall, my momentary weakness, as an excuse to take it. We'll be back tomorrow to discuss it further, Mom, Rebecca said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. This time I didn't resist. Get some rest. Julian gave me a tight-lipped smile. Yes, Louise. We'll talk more tomorrow. They turned and walked back towards the house, their steps brisk and purposeful. I watched them go, the scent of roses suddenly cloying, the vibrant garden now tinged with a sense of impending loss. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn, a cold resolve hardened within me. I would not let them win. Whatever they were planning, whatever they wanted from me, I would find a way to stop them. I had to. This wasn't just about my home, my life. It was about something far more precious, my dignity. And I would not let them steal that from me. Not without a fight. Rain lashed against the windows of my own living room, a grim counterpoint to the artificial cheer Rebecca tried to project. Mom, we found you unconscious on the floor, she said, her voice tight with what I supposed was meant to be concern. Julian, ever the solicitous fiancé, hovered nearby, nodding gravely. The doctor said it's a miracle you didn't break anything. I looked from one to the other, my heart sinking. I hadn't been unconscious. I'd simply tripped over a rug and taken a longer time than usual to get back on my feet. Now, here they were, spinning this incident into a life-altering crisis. I'm perfectly fine, I insisted, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice, just a little shaken. Rebecca exchanged a look with Julian, a silent communication that excluded me, Doctor. Miller said it's not safe for you to live alone anymore, she said, her tone softening slightly. We've found a lovely place for you, Sunshine Manor. It's got excellent care, and you'll be able to socialize with people your own age. Socialize. The word felt like a barb. I'd always been fiercely independent, relishing the quiet solitude of my home. The thought of being shunted off to some facility, surrounded by strangers, filled me with a chilling dread. I don't need to go to a nursing home, I protested, my voice rising in panic. I can manage perfectly well on my own. Julian stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on Rebecca's arm. Louise, he began, his voice smooth and condescending. We're just trying to do what's best for you. Imagine if you'd fallen and broken a hip. You could have been lying there for days. The image he painted, vivid and terrifying, sent a shiver down my spine. But beneath the fear, a flicker of anger began to ignite. They were using my stumble, a minor mishap, as an excuse to do what? The thought hung heavy in the air, unspoken but palpable. I appreciate your concern, I said, forcing a smile, but I'm not ready to give up my independence. Rebecca sighed dramatically. Mom, please don't make this difficult. We've already arranged everything. Your room is ready, and they're expecting you tomorrow. Tomorrow, my breath caught in my throat. They had orchestrated this entire charade without even consulting me, my own children, treating me like a child. The anger simmering within me began to boil. Tomorrow, I repeated, my voice trembling. You're moving me out of my home tomorrow. Rebecca's face softened slightly, but her eyes held a steely resolve. We're doing this for your own good, Mom, she said softly. You'll see. You'll be much happier at Sunshine Manor. That night, I lay in my bed, the familiar comfort of my home suddenly alien and cold. The rain continued to batter the windows, mirroring the storm raging within me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Their concern felt too eager, their explanations too pat. I reached for the bedside lamp, its warm glow a small comfort in the encroaching darkness. As my hand brushed against a stack of papers, a memory surfaced. Just last week, Rebecca had been pestering me to update my will, insisting it was a simple formality. I'd brushed her off, promising to do it later. Now, the pieces began to fall into place. The sudden concern, the hasty arrangements, the insistence that I moved to Sunshine Manor. It wasn't about my well-being. It was about my house, my finances, my assets. They wanted me out of the way. Tears of anger and betrayal streamed down my face. I had worked hard my entire life, building a comfortable nest egg for my retirement. And now, my own children were trying to steal it from me. The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. But as the initial shock subsided, a quiet resolve began to harden within me. I wouldn't let them get away with this. I wouldn't let them rob me of my home, my independence, my dignity. I would find a way to fight back. I would expose their deception and reclaim what was rightfully mine. The following days were a blur of forced smiles and feigned compliance. I packed a few belongings, the familiar objects heavy with the weight of betrayal. Rebecca and Julian oversaw the process, their eyes gleaming with a barely concealed triumph. I played along, letting them think they had won. But beneath the surface, I was plotting my revenge. I knew I needed help, someone on the inside, someone who could witness their machinations firsthand. And then I remembered Martha, a sharp-witted woman I had met during my brief, involuntary stay at Sunshine Manor. We had connected over our shared love of crossword puzzles and our mutual distrust of overly solicitous relatives. I managed to slip Martha a note, outlining my suspicions and asking for her help. She responded with a knowing look and a subtle nod. The game was afoot. While Rebecca and Julian busied themselves with emptying my house, Martha kept a watchful eye on their movements, reporting back to me through coded messages tucked into library books. I learned that they were planning to sell my house as soon as I was settled in Sunshine Manor, using the proceeds to fund their lavish lifestyle. Rebecca had even started eyeing a new car, a sleek, expensive model that she had always coveted. The audacity of it all fueled my resolve. I would not let them enjoy the fruits of their deceit. Weeks turned into months. I played the role of the frail, confused old woman, letting Rebecca and Julian believe they had succeeded in their scheme. They visited me infrequently, their visits perfunctory and devoid of genuine affection. They inquired about my health, made empty promises to visit more often, and then quickly excused themselves, eager to return to their newly acquired spoils. Each visit, each empty promise, fueled the fire of my revenge. I knew I had to act soon, before they could completely dismantle my life. I needed to strike a blow that would not only expose their treachery, but also leave them utterly humiliated. And I knew just how to do it. It involved a little bit of subterfuge, a healthy dose of public embarrassment, and the perfect opportunity which, as it turned out, wasn't too far off. Something was coming, something big, and Rebecca and Julian were about to learn that they had underestimated their old mother. The game was far from over. Rain lashed against the window pane, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Rebecca and Julian breezed in, all smiles and forced cheer, their visit as predictable as the Wednesday bingo. "Mom, how are you doing, darling?" Rebecca chirped, pecking my cheek. Julian gave a stiff nod, his eyes darting around the room as if assessing its resale value. "Fine," I replied, my voice flat. "Just fine." They sat, the silence punctuated by the clatter of teacups from the common room. "We brought you some biscuits," Rebecca said, placing a tin on the bedside table. "Your favorite?" "My favorite, right." As if they'd ever bothered to remember. "Thank you, dear," I murmured, fighting back the bitter taste in my throat. Their visits had become a pantomime, a performance for the nurses, a display of their filial duty. They'd ask perfunctory questions about my health, comment on the dreary weather, then leave, promising to return soon. Soon, another empty promise. The emptiness gnawed at me, a hollow ache in my chest. I'd lived in this sterile box for 3 weeks now, 3 weeks since that fall, 3 weeks since they'd convinced me this was the best place for me. "It's just for a little while, Mom," Rebecca had said, her hand resting on mine, a touch that felt chillingly impersonal now. "Just until you're back on your feet." Back on my feet. I'd been perfectly capable of managing on my own, a little unsteady perhaps, but certainly not incapacitated. The doctor had even said so, but they'd insisted, their voices laced with a concern that felt suspiciously urgent, suspicious liar-hairs. The gnawing suspicion solidified into a cold knot of dread in my stomach. It had started with the whispers, overheard snippets of conversations between Rebecca and Julian. The house power of attorney so much easier this way. I dismissed them at first, attributing them to my adult state, the after effects of the fall. But then I'd noticed the documents, the paperwork they'd brought for me to sign, filled with legalese I couldn't decipher. "It's just routine, Mom," Rebecca had said smoothly. Standard procedure. Standard procedure to strip your mother of everything she owns." Martha, the woman in the next bed, bless her gossipy heart, had filled in the blanks. She'd seen it all before, families discarding their elderly like worn-out furniture. "They put you here, honey, so they can get their hands on your house," she'd whispered, her voice raspy with years of cigarette smoke and unspoken truths. "It's always the house. My house. The house I'd lived in for 40 years. The house filled with memories, with laughter, with the ghosts of birthdays and Christmas mornings. The house they were planning to steal." The thought sent a surge of anger through me, hot and sharp. I felt a flicker of defiance, a spark of resolve igniting in the ashes of my despair. They wouldn't get away with it. I wouldn't let them. I picked up the biscuit tin Rebecca had brought, the cheerful floral design mocking me. I opened it, the sweet aroma of shortbread filling the air. I took a bite, the familiar taste turning to ash in my mouth. I would play along, feign weakness, let them think they had won. But beneath the surface, I would be plotting, planning, waiting for the right moment to strike back. They wanted my house. They wanted my money. They would get something all right. They would get a lesson they wouldn't soon forget, a taste of their own medicine. And I knew just the recipe. Rebecca and Julian were gathering their things, their faces alight with a relief they didn't bother to conceal. "We'll be back next week, Mom," Rebecca said, her voice bright, almost too bright. "Don't worry about a thing." "No," I said, my voice soft, almost a whisper. "Don't you worry about a thing." I watched them leave, their backs retreating down the sterile corridor. The rain outside had stopped, a sliver of sunlight breaking through the clouds. A faint smile played on my lips. The storm inside me, however, had just begun. The stale air of the Sunshine Manor common room hung heavy with the scent of disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. Rebecca, my own daughter, sat across from me, a forced smile plastered on her face. "Mom," she began, her voice dripping with false concern, "Julian and I were just talking, and we just think it might be smart to put the house on the market." My stomach dropped. I clutched the worn, crocheted blanket around me, a gift from my late husband, a physical reminder of a happier time. "Put the house on the market," I repeated, my voice trembling slightly. "What do you mean?" "Well," Julian chimed in, his perfectly coiffed hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "It's a lot of house for one person, Louise. And with you here, it's just sitting empty." He picked up a magazine from the coffee table, flipping through it nonchalantly. "A smaller place, closer to amenities, would be much more suitable, don't you think?" He didn't even bother to look at me. "Amenities," I scoffed, the word echoing the hollowness in my chest. "You mean closer to you, don't you, Julian?" I fixed my gaze on Rebecca, searching her eyes for a flicker of guilt, a hint of the daughter I thought I knew. But there was nothing, only a carefully constructed mask of concern. "Since when did you two become so interested in my well-being?" Rebecca sighed dramatically, placing a hand on mine. Her touch was cold, devoid of warmth. "Mom, please don't be like this. We're only trying to help." She glanced at Julian, a silent communication passing between them. "The upkeep on that house is expensive. The taxes, the repairs, it's a burden. Wouldn't it be easier to have everything taken care of here?" "Easier for whom, Rebecca?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The words caught in my throat, choked by the rising tide of betrayal. "My own daughter, plotting to sell my home, the place where I raised her, the place filled with a lifetime of memories, the place where my husband, her father, had breathed his last. They thought I was senile, a doddering old woman easily manipulated. They thought I was unaware of their whispered conversations, their furtive glances. They thought I didn't understand their thinly veiled suggestions about downsizing and making things easier. But I heard them, I saw them, and I understood perfectly. "Mom, we're just trying to be practical," Rebecca insisted, her voice tightening. "It's a big decision, we know, but we think it's for the best." She stood up, smoothing down her skirt. "We'll come back and talk about it later. We just wanted to plant the seed." Julian followed suit, giving me a curt nod before they both turned and walked away. I watched them go, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. The common room, with its faded floral wallpaper and worn furniture, suddenly felt like a prison cell. I was trapped, surrounded by strangers, stripped of my independence, and betrayed by my own flesh and blood. The thought of losing my home, my sanctuary, the last tangible connection to my husband, filled me with a despair so profound it threatened to consume me. But then something shifted within me. The despair began to recede, replaced by a slow-burning anger. They underestimated me. They saw me as a frail old woman, easily dismissed and manipulated. They thought they could steal my home, my memories, my life, without a fight. They were wrong. I pulled myself up straighter in my chair, the warm crocheted blanket still clutched in my hands. The faint smell of lavender, embedded in the yarn from years of use, filled my nostrils. It was a small comfort, a reminder of a time before the betrayal, before the lies. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. I wouldn't let them win. I would find a way to fight back. I would reclaim what was rightfully mine. The quiet resolve solidified within me, a steel rod bracing my spine. I had a lifetime of experience, of resilience, of cunning they knew nothing about. They thought they had me cornered. They had no idea what I was capable of. The game, my dear children, has just begun, and I, your supposedly senile mother, am about to play. The first step, I realized, was to appear compliant. Let them think their plan was working. Let them underestimate me. It would make the eventual victory all the sweeter. I opened my eyes, a flicker of something hard and cold glinting in their depths. They wanted to play games, fine. Let the games begin. The rhythmic whir of the oxygen machine next to Martha's bed was the soundtrack to my sleepless nights. I pretended to doze, eyes squeezed shut, but my mind raced. Rebecca's words, "It's for the best, Mom," echoed in the sterile quiet of the room. For the best for whom? I wondered bitterly. Martha shifted in her sleep, muttering something unintelligible. Then clearer, she said, "My grandson thinks I don't understand what power of attorney means." My eyes snapped open. I turned my head slowly to look at her. She was still asleep, her face slack, but her words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. Power of attorney. That's what Rebecca and David had been so insistent on. "It's just a formality, Mom," David had said, his smile tight. "So we can manage things if you take a turn." A turn. They were waiting for me to take a turn. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Martha stirred again. "They want my house," she mumbled, her voice barely a whisper. "The vultures." My heart pounded. Was she talking about her own family, or had she overheard my conversations with Rebecca and David? I held my breath, waiting for her to say more, but she settled back into sleep, leaving me suspended in a growing unease. I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb her, and padded across the cold tile floor to the window. The parking lot below was bathed in the harsh glare of security lights. I watched as a lone car pulled in, its headlights cutting through the darkness. It stopped near the entrance, and a figure emerged, heading towards the building. I squinted, trying to make out who it was. It looked like Julian, Rebecca's fiancé. What was he doing here so late? He hadn't visited me once since I'd been admitted. A sudden thought struck me. They're in this together, I whispered to myself, the realization chilling me to the bone. Julian, with his slick-back hair and charming smile, had always seemed too good to be true. I had dismissed my initial reservations, attributing them to a mother's natural protectiveness. Now, looking back, I saw the subtle manipulations, the way he subtly steered conversations, the influence he wielded over Rebecca. Julian thinks it's best to, Mom, Rebecca had said more than once. Best for whom? Certainly not for me. I returned to my bed, my mind buzzing with this new information. It was all starting to make sense. The hurried visits, the evasive answers, the constant reassurances that everything would be all right. They were lying. They were all lying, and they were using my vulnerability to their advantage. The following morning, I pretended to be weaker than I was. I let the nurse fuss over me, accepting her help with tasks I could easily manage myself. I played the part of the frail old woman, the one they thought I was. Oh dear, I'd murmur, feigning confusion. Where am I? Or have you seen my Rebecca? The nurses, bless their hearts, bought it hook, line, and sinker. They could and comforted me, completely oblivious to the steel hardening within me. I needed information, and playing the doddering old lady was the perfect way to get it. I listened intently to their conversations, gleaning snippets of gossip, piecing together the puzzle of Sunshine Manor. I learned about residents whose families had abandoned them, residents who had been swindled out of their life savings. And I learned about the power of attorney, the legal document that could strip me of everything I owned. Mrs. Bennet, you have a visitor, a nurse announced, interrupting my eavesdropping. It was Rebecca, her face drawn and tired. Mom, she said, her voice strained. We need to talk about the power of attorney. I feigned confusion. Power of attorney? What's that, dear? Rebecca sighed. It's just some paperwork, Mom, so we can take care of your finances while you're here. Oh, I said, my voice trembling slightly, like paying my bills and such. Yes, exactly, she said, relief evident in her tone. It's all for your own good, Mom. You don't need to worry about a thing. I looked at her, my eyes wide and innocent. Of course, dear, whatever you think is best. She smiled, a genuine smile this time, and I felt a pang of guilt. But it was quickly replaced by a surge of cold determination. I wouldn't let them win. I would fight back. Later that evening, after Rebecca had left, I waited until Martha was asleep before slipping out of bed again. I retrieved the small notebook and pen I had hidden under my mattress. I began to write, carefully documenting everything I had learned, every lie, every manipulation. I wrote about the overheard conversations, about Julian's late-night visit, about Rebecca's eagerness to get the power of attorney signed. I wrote about my suspicions, my fears, and my growing resolve. I wrote until my hand cramped and the words blurred on the page. I would expose them. I would reclaim what was rightfully mine, and they would learn that a mother's love, when betrayed, can transform into something far more potent, something far more dangerous. I hid the notebook again, a small, secret weapon in my ongoing war. The whir of the oxygen machine filled the room, a steady, rhythmic pulse in the quiet darkness. I closed my eyes, but this time, it wasn't the sound of defeat that lulled me towards sleep. It was the sound of hope, the sound of revenge. Sunshine Manor, my room. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the worn floral carpet. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. It was time to take matters into my own hands. "Hello, this is Louise Bennett," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'd like to speak with someone about my accounts." After a brief hold, a polite young man came on the line. I explained that I needed a full statement of my recent transactions. "Certainly, Mrs. Bennett," he replied. "Could you please verify your details?" I rattled off my account number and security questions, a cold knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about proving what my own children were capable of. The silence on the other end stretched, broken only by the faint tapping of keys. "There seems to be a discrepancy, Mrs. Bennett," the young man finally said. "A substantial amount of money has been transferred out of your account in the last few weeks." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Transferred where?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "To two separate accounts," he replied. He then proceeded to give me the account details. I grabbed a pen and paper, scribbling them down with a shaky hand. "Thank you," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "Thank you so much." I hung up, my mind racing. I recognized one of the account numbers immediately. It belonged to Rebecca. The other, I had a sinking suspicion it was David's. My children, my own flesh and blood. They'd put me in this place, a gilded cage disguised as care, and were systematically draining my life savings. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the numbers I'd scrawled on the paper. It was a staggering amount, enough to make a significant dent in my retirement fund, enough to leave me practically destitute if they continued. They'd even started the process of selling my house. The house I'd lived in for over 40 years, the house filled with memories of birthdays, holidays, and family dinners. Dinners that now seemed like a cruel joke, a performance for a mother they clearly saw as nothing more than a burden, a source of income to be exploited. Everything all right. Dear Martha, the kind woman who shared my room, peered at me over her spectacles. I shook my head, unable to speak. Tears welled in my eyes. Martha patted my hand. "Sometimes a good cry helps," she said softly. "It cleanses the soul." I nodded, grateful for her quiet compassion. I knew I couldn't let them see me break. Not yet. I needed to be strong, to plan my next move. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze, replaying every conversation, every interaction with Rebecca and David over the past few months. The subtle hints, the veiled questions about my finances, the insistence that I needed more help than I actually did. It had all been a carefully orchestrated performance, a long con designed to isolate and manipulate me. I dried my tears, a new resolve hardening within me. I wouldn't let them get away with this. I wouldn't let them steal my future. I would fight back. I would expose their treachery, and I would reclaim what was rightfully mine. The next morning, I called the lawyer I'd used for years, a sharp woman named Sarah Jenkins. "Sarah," I said, my voice firm. I need your help. I explained the situation, the evidence I had gathered, the betrayal I had uncovered. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Louise, Sarah finally said, her voice laced with disbelief. I can't believe Rebecca and David would do this to you. I felt a grim satisfaction. Even my own lawyer was shocked by their audacity. I need you to freeze their accounts, I said, and initiate legal proceedings to halt the sale of my house. Of course, Sarah replied. I'll get started right away. That evening, I received a frantic call from Rebecca. Mom, she cried, her voice shrill. What have you done? My accounts are frozen. I allowed myself a small, private smile. Rebecca, I said calmly, I think you know exactly what I've done. She sputtered and raged, accusing me of being senile, of imagining things. I listened patiently, letting her rant until she finally ran out of steam. You won't get away with this, she shrieked. Julian and I need that money. Perhaps you should have thought of that before you decided to steal from your own mother. I replied, my voice ice cold. I hung up, a sense of triumph coursing through me. This was just the beginning. I had a few more surprises in store for my dear children. Surprises that would leave them reeling. They had underestimated their mother. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They were about to learn a very valuable lesson. Sunshine Manor's activity room buzzed with the usual afternoon chaos. Oh, sweetie, the nurse chirped, patting my hand condescendingly. Your daughter handles all that now. My stomach churned. I'd simply asked to use the phone to call my bank, a perfectly reasonable request, and was met with that patronizing smile. Rebecca took care of everything financial when you moved in. Remember, the nurse added, her tone implying I was senile. It's all sorted, dear. I plastered on a sweet smile. Of course, dear. How silly of me. Just a senior moment, you know. Inside, though, a cold fire ignited. Rebecca's control was tightening, and it was time to loosen her grip. Perhaps I could just confirm a few details with them. I persisted gently. It would ease my mind, you see. The nurse hesitated. Well, Rebecca did say no unnecessary calls. She doesn't want you to get confused. That was it. The thinly veiled excuse, the blatant control. It confirmed everything I'd suspected. I feigned resignation. Very well, dear. Perhaps a game of bingo then. The nurse beamed, relieved to have averted a crisis. Wonderful idea, Louise. You always enjoy bingo. As I joined the other residents, my mind raced. I needed to find a way around this communication blockade. Rebecca, and likely my son David, were systematically isolating me, cutting me off from the outside world. Later that evening, while the other residents dozed in front of the television, I slipped out of the common room. I'd noticed Martha, a sharp-witted woman despite her frail appearance, often reading late at night. Perhaps she could be my ally. I found her in her room, a book of poetry open on her lap. Martha, dear, I whispered, peeking in. Mind if I join you for a moment? She looked up, startled, then smiled warmly. Louise, come in. What brings you out so late? I explained my predicament, the blocked calls, my growing suspicion about Rebecca and David's motives. They're sweet as pie when they visit, I confided, but something feels terribly wrong. Martha listened intently, her gaze shrewd. They've been asking about your house, haven't they? She asked quietly. My heart sank. Yes, I admitted. Rebecca suggested selling it to ease my burden. Said the upkeep was too much for me. Martha nodded grimly. Classic, she muttered. Happens all the time. Children eager to get their hands on their parents' assets. I felt a surge of both anger and relief. Relief that someone believed me, anger at my children's betrayal. But what can I do? I asked, my voice trembling. I'm trapped here. They control everything. Martha's eyes twinkled. Not everything, Louise. Not yet. She leaned closer. My grandson visits me every Saturday. He's a bright young man, studying law. Perhaps he can help. Hope flickered within me. A way out, a crack in the wall Rebecca and David had built around me. That would be wonderful. Martha, I breathed. Truly wonderful. The following Saturday felt like an eternity. I played bingo with forced enthusiasm, made small talk with the other residents, all the while my heart pounding with anticipation. Finally, Martha's grandson, a tall, earnest young man named Daniel, arrived. We sat together in a quiet corner of the activity room, away from prying eyes and ears. I recounted my story. The sudden move to Sunshine Manor, Rebecca's control over my finances, their persistent inquiries about my house. Daniel listened patiently, taking notes on a small pad. Do you have any documentation? He asked. Anything that proves your ownership of the house, bank statements, anything at all. I shook my head. It's all at my house, I explained, frustration rising. Rebecca has access, of course. She has a key. Daniel pondered for a moment. We need to get you power of attorney back, he said decisively, and we need access to your financial records. It's possible Rebecca and your son have already started transferring assets. A wave of nausea washed over me. The thought of my own children stealing from me was unbearable. But how? I asked weakly. They won't let me near my own bank, let alone my house. Daniel smiled reassuringly. We'll find a way. First, I need to assess the legal situation. I'll need you to sign a few documents authorizing me to act on your behalf. Then we'll start gathering evidence. He pulled a few papers from his briefcase. This authorizes me to access your bank records. This one gives me limited power of attorney to communicate with your children regarding your finances. I signed the documents without hesitation, a renewed sense of purpose surging through me. As Daniel left, he squeezed my hand. Don't worry, Mrs. Bennet, he said. We'll get this sorted, I promise. Watching him go, I felt a glimmer of hope I hadn't felt since arriving at Sunshine Manor. Rebecca and David had underestimated me. They saw me as a frail old woman, easily manipulated and controlled. They were wrong. I was just beginning to fight. The anticipation of their faces when my plan unfolded warmed me more than any bingo win or condescending pat on the hand. My house, my assets, they were mine, and I would reclaim them all. Rebecca's upcoming wedding to Julian would be an interesting affair, indeed. I had a feeling it was going to be a celebration I'd never forget. The whir of the Sunshine Manor Business Center's ancient computer fan was almost as loud as the pounding in my chest. Ready, Louise, Martha whispered, peering over my shoulder. I nodded. my hand hovering over the mouse. Just breathe, she encouraged, patting my arm. It'll all be over soon. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hand. Clicks. The familiar Windows XP loading screen appeared, a glacial progress bar inching its way across the screen. It felt like an eternity. Finally, the desktop loaded, revealing the shortcut to Rebecca's email account. This was it. "You sure about this password, Louise?" Martha's voice was barely audible. I'd confided in Martha, another resident here, about my suspicions. She was sharp as a tack, despite the rumors circulating about her forgetfulness, and understood technology better than anyone else at Sunshine Manor. Without her, I wouldn't have been able to access this computer, let alone remember Rebecca's carelessly chosen password, Julian, forever. "Positive," I said, typing it in. The inbox opened. Hundreds of emails. "Where to begin search for house?" Martha suggested, her eyes glued to the screen. I typed in the word, and within seconds, a list of emails appeared. My heart sank as I scanned the subject lines. Power of attorney, real estate agent contact, moving sale. Each one was a nail in the coffin of my former life. I opened the first one, from Rebecca to Julian. "Darling," it began, "once Mom is settled in, we can start the process of selling her place. Think of what we can do with that money. A down payment on our dream house, that trip to Bali." My vision blurred with tears. I'd given them everything. My love, my support, my trust. And this was how they repaid me. Martha squeezed my hand. "Keep going, Louise. You need proof." I wiped my eyes and clicked on another email. This one from Rebecca to a real estate agent. It included photos of my house, my home, with captions highlighting its charming features and investment potential. They were already planning to sell it, to erase me completely. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. This wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about disrespect, about being treated like I was already gone. We spent the next hour meticulously documenting everything: emails, bank statements, online property listings, every piece of evidence that proved their betrayal. Martha even helped me print out hard copies, whispering physical evidence is always best. "Louise, can't argue with paper." I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. I was no longer the frail old woman they thought they could discard. I was gathering my ammunition. "There's one more thing," I said, a plan forming in my mind. I navigated to Rebecca's online banking portal, the login details conveniently saved in her browser. My hands were steady now, my purpose clear. I clicked on the Transfer Funds tab. "What are you doing, Louise?" Martha asked, her eyes widening. "Just a little something to secure my future," I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. I typed in the account number of a new account I'd opened earlier that week, one they knew nothing about. Then I entered the amount, a substantial sum, enough to ensure my comfort and independence for the foreseeable future, enough to make them realize they'd underestimated me. I clicked confirm, and the transaction went through. A wave of relief washed over me. It was done. I closed the browser window and turned to Martha. "Thank you," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Don't mention it, Louise," Martha replied, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Now, what about that trip to Bali you were talking about?" We shared a knowing smile. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. And this time, I was holding all the cards. I had a feeling Rebecca's wedding, just a week away, was going to be a lot more interesting than she anticipated. The thought sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. Let the games begin. The crisp click of my heels on the marble floor echoed through the courtroom. I smoothed the lapel of my suit, a small smile playing on my lips. "Order in the court," the bailiff called, his voice booming through the hushed room. Rebecca and David shifted nervously in their seats, their eyes darting between me and the judge. Julian, Rebecca's fiancé, sat stiffly beside her, his face pale. "This case," the judge began, adjusting his glasses, "concerns the estate of Louise Bennett. Mrs. Bennett, you allege your children have unduly influenced you into signing over your assets. Is that correct?" "It is, Your Honor," I replied, my voice clear and steady. I presented my evidence methodically, laying out the carefully documented timeline of their deceit. Bank statements, emails, even recordings of hushed conversations I'd managed to capture during my time at Sunshine Manor. They told me I was getting confused. I explained to the judge, my voice trembling slightly, but resolute, that I needed help managing my affairs. They said it was for my own good. I could feel Rebecca's glare burning into the side of my face, but I refused to meet her gaze. This wasn't about them. This was about justice. They painted a picture of a frail, senile old woman, I continued, holding up a copy of the power of attorney they'd tricked me into signing. They convinced the staff at Sunshine Manor I was incapable of making my own decisions. "She's losing her grip," I overheard Rebecca telling the administrator. "It's best we take control." My voice cracked as I recalled the sting of those words, the casual cruelty with which my own children had dismissed me, discarded me. But I wasn't confused. I stated firmly, meeting the judge's gaze. I was betrayed. I presented the judge with a document prepared by my new lawyer, meticulously outlining the financial discrepancies, the forged signatures, the outright lies. With each piece of evidence, Rebecca and David's faces grew paler, their fidgeting more pronounced. Julian seemed to shrink further into his seat. "Furthermore, Your Honor," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "I'd like to bring to the court's attention a particular transaction." I projected a copy of a recent bank statement onto the screen. "This," I said, pointing to a large sum transferred from my account to Rebecca's, "was supposedly for medical expenses. However, further investigation reveals that this money was used as a down payment on a luxury vacation home in the Bahamas." "A vacation home," I repeated, my voice laced with irony, "that my children planned to endure while I was indisposed." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Rebecca sputtered a denial, but the evidence was irrefutable. The judge looked down at the documents, his expression grim. "Mrs. Bennett," he said finally, looking up at me, "I find in your favor. The power of attorney is hereby revoked. Your assets will be returned to your control." A wave of relief washed over me. It was over. I had won. I glanced at Rebecca and David. Rebecca's face was contorted in a mask of anger and disbelief. David stared blankly ahead, His shoulders slumped in defeat. Julian looked like he wanted to disappear. However, the judge continued, his voice taking on a sterner tone. This matter does not end here. I am referring this case to the district attorney for further investigation into potential criminal charges against your children. This wasn't part of my plan. I had simply wanted my life back, my home, my dignity. I hadn't necessarily wanted them to face criminal charges. But then I looked at their faces, the faces of the children who had so readily discarded their mother, and I felt a hardened resolve. They needed to understand the consequences of their actions. One more thing, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady and clear. I've instructed my lawyer to prepare a new will. Rebecca and David snapped their heads towards me, their eyes wide with a sudden, dawning fear. In light of recent events, I continued, addressing the judge, but keeping my gaze fixed on my children. I have decided to make some adjustments to my beneficiaries. I paused for effect, letting the weight of my words sink in. I've decided to leave my entire estate, I announced, my voice ringing with finality, to Sunshine Manor, the nursing home where I spent the last few months. They, at least, treated me with kindness and respect. The look on Rebecca's face was priceless, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and utter devastation. David's face was ashen. Julian just looked bewildered. I turned to leave the courtroom, the click of my heels echoing once again through the silent room. Justice had been served, and I, Louise Bennett, was finally free.